Megan's not my publicist on this book, so just send it directly to me.
Oh, okay. That'd be fine.
All right. Well, we are live. Good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we're here with another virtual event. And tonight we have our good friend Lee Goldberg. He's going to be talking about his brand new book, Gated Prey. And Lee has signed a bunch of copies for us. And I'll go ahead and put a link in the comments field if you wish to purchase one. We are running low. And Matt Witten joins us tonight also to talk about his new book, The Necklace, which Barbara is holding up. And are we getting signed book plates, or were you sending us some? I'll put a link in the comments field for those too. But anyway, Barbara?
Thank you very much. Well, we haven't met Matt before, so it'll be a pleasure. And there's a really interesting origin story that goes along with The Necklace. So
yeah, and if you have questions for Lee or Matt throughout, as they occur to you throughout the hour, go ahead and put them in the comments field, and I'll be happy to ask anything.
And I should tell all of you on YouTube and Facebook around the world that this is not my actual bedroom. I'm in a hotel in San Diego. Chic. And as I told Barbara, I asked the hooker to leave before this event, and out of respect to all of you. But this is not my sterile home you're seeing in the background.
People have so many weird backgrounds, or not weird, but different backgrounds for Zoom. I don't think any of us really question it. I had a green screen for a long time, and in order to make on the green screen, I had a picture of my library, and the dog was on the couch when we took the photograph. So people would watch me in the library, and their only question was, why isn't the dog moving? For the entire hour, the dog, is there. Anyway, the background doesn't matter. So I would like to say, Lee, that I didn't have an advanced reading copy of Gated Prey for whatever reason. And so I took it home yesterday and I read it in one gulp. And I have to say, it's one of the best mysteries that I have read in a long time. You absolutely got me with at least one of the stories. I did not see it coming. I kind of questioned the second one. Mm-hmm. But I think your two plots on this are fabulous.
Well, thank you so much. Coming from you, that means a lot because you've read everything, everything. I'm sure you're rarely surprised by anything you read.
Well, I really was surprised by this, and I only wish that we could talk about this book in more detail. But unfortunately, if we even talk about one of the crimes, we're going to give it all away. But I'm interested that you once again give credit to this Wisconsin seminar that you go to, and that seems to be where you get these extraordinary cases.
Well, I might not get the entire case, but I might get the germ of an idea. I go to these homicide investigator training conferences to get the forensic details that'll ground my books in reality, so you'll buy all the stuff I'm making up, which is 90% of it. And each one of these seminars that I go to, they present a lot of different cases, and I take scrupulous notes because I'm not sure what case will ever end up in one of my books or be the inspiration for me to expand upon. But the best part about these conferences is the contacts I've made, because I can come up with a plot and then contact the blood spatter analysts and the coroners, investigators, everyone who worked on the case and get their insights. And that's been the best part, because I don't want to do a documentary. I don't want to do a boring forensic thing. My books are more about character. All I need are those 3 or 4 facts that will ground my fiction in some kind of reality, as I said before, so you'll buy all the BS I'm spinning.
Well, if you're going to write about the sheriff's department, a detective in the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, I have to say, briefly, I had like a blank, and I'm going, what is LASD? Because, you're using...
It's a UTI, Barbara.
What can I say? I'm used to LAPD, but LASD, really, I thought maybe it was some kind of drug, but then I realized that it was the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, and your community of Calabasas falls into, it's not in LA proper, so it falls into the jurisdiction of the Sheriff's Department. I don't know how it is in California, but most places, a Sheriff's Department is run by the county, and the police departments are run by the metro areas. So in Phoenix and in Scottsdale, we have separate police departments, but then we have a sheriff of Maricopa County. And, there are various jurisdictional things that go on. I learned from John LeSquire, who also has consultants, that San Francisco is both a county and a metro area. So, it's the same geography. And
there are cities within Los Angeles County that don't have their own police departments and are patrolled
Right.
by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, like West Hollywood. So you have this little town surrounded by the LAPD, but their law enforcement is the sheriff. And the same is true of Calabasas, Agoura
Right.
Hills, and other places. And it causes all kinds of jurisdictional disputes, which is great for a writer because it just adds more conflict and creates more pressure. And in approaching a police procedural set in Los Angeles, it's been done so many times before and so well by Michael Connelly and Joseph Wamba. How are you going to do it? And 1,000 other writers and television shows. How are you going to do better than them? And my feeling is you can't. So by setting it in a jurisdiction in Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department in Lost Hills, an area that's never been covered in fiction before, I have it all to myself. I don't have to worry about all the other writers who've tread the same path as me. It's entirely fresh ground.
absolutely true. I'm pretty sure that Raymond Chandler has at least one book where there is some, difference in jurisdiction. I can't remember, is it like Gardenia City or something, Garden City?
Well, also Malibu is within Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and Lost Hills. And Malibu, of course, has appeared in a million copies.
Right. Anyway, so Eve Ronan, the detective, and this is her third investigation. And let me say, since I start out by saying how much I love this book, you don't actually have to have read the first two in order to read Gated Prey, although there's references back to why Eve is so much despised by her fellow officers and why she has conflict with them. So, but it's not going to kill you if you start with Gated Prey and then you're so intrigued that you go back and read Lost Hills and, sorry, what's the name of the second one?
Bone Canyon.
Thank you. Bone Canyon, which I thought also was an amazing plot. So let's talk to Matt for a moment. So we don't want him just sitting there on screen smiling at us and thinking,
It's okay.
"Why am
I enjoy
here?"
hearing Lee.
And he's damn sexy. So he's making us
Right.
both look good.
So Matt's book, The Necklace, I love this, was inspired by a true fundraising event for a woman needing to travel to the execution, which is some distance away, of a man who had raped and murdered her little girl some 20 years ago. But you gave it a twist with a real ticking clock. Now, I'm fascinated with that. I didn't know that you could do like GoFundMe for, a parent wanting to go and actually witness the execution of somebody that, had done harm to one of their children. Where did you run across that, Matt?
Well, I read an article in the Glens Falls Post-Star back in 2012. That's a small newspaper up in the Adirondacks. And the article was about a woman who held a fundraiser at a local bar, Randy's Roost in Queensbury, New York, to raise money for her trip to North Dakota, where she was going to witness the execution, like you say, of the man who had killed her daughter 22 years previously. And she didn't have any money. She's very poor. She had a medical condition that she couldn't fly, so she needed money to raise money for herself and her husband to drive from upstate New York to North Dakota. So they did. And so I read this story, and I found her story so moving that, I clipped out the article and I put it up on the bulletin board next to my desk for about 8 years. And I thought about this character, about her, for 8 years. And I didn't really know what the story would be. I knew she was a great character, but, is it going to be like an artsy kind of road movie or a road novel? So I was out for coffee one morning with a friend of mine, a writer named John Henry Davis. And I told him the story, what I just told you. And he said, "Oh, I know what happens." And I said, "Oh, please tell me. I've been trying to figure out for 8 years what happens." So he said to me, she's going to, and this is not too much of a, a spoiler, because it happens pretty early in the book. So John Henry said, she comes to find out something on her trip to North Dakota that makes her think, my God, maybe this guy who's about to be executed on Saturday at 5:30 actually might be innocent. And the real killer is still out there. And there's another little girl who's at risk. So when John Henry told me this is an idea, immediately, right away, I thought, I don't think so. That's too, I don't know. It's just, but by the next morning I woke up and I realized he was right and started writing the book.
Excellent. Now, here's the question that first occurred to me. Why is he being executed in North Dakota when she is living in upstate in New York? Where did the rape and murder of the daughter occur?
It's a federal crime because the guy took her across state lines before he killed her.
He took
So-
her where? To North Dakota?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. He took her to Massachusetts, to Western Massachusetts, before he killed her. So that makes it a federal crime. And once it's a federal crime, they can put you in federal prison anywhere. You know, the crime might be in New York. They could put you in prison anywhere from North Dakota to California to Florida. It's just whatever's most convenient for the for the U.S. prison system at that time.
Got it. Okay. I mean, I knew it was a federal crime once you transport somebody across state lines, and that goes all the way back to the Lindbergh case, if I
Right.
remember my law correctly. That
Right. And that's similar to the real life case where, as I say, the guy was in North Dakota.
Mhm. So it's a wonderful premise, I think. And indeed, you do start her out on the trip, and then doubts do occur to her. So we'll come back to that. It's called The Necklace for a reason. Unfortunately, a reason we can't discuss in any detail, but it's an interesting title for the book. So Lee, let's go back to your two cases, which start out wildly dissimilar, are actually anchored by the fact that they both involve this upscale gated community in Calabasas, which I'm going to assume that you made up, but there
Yes and
are
no.
similar communities
Yes
in
and no.
Calabasas, right?
I live in a gated community in Calabasas. I was president of my HOA for 14 years, on the board for 20 some years. So I'm very familiar with the sorts of people who live in these communities and the kinds of problems you have in them, and the ridiculous amount of trust the homeowners have, and just the idea of the security of a gated community. They leave their doors unlocked. They think that they are in a bubble that protects them from all the avarice and crime and evil that's out there. And it doesn't, because we had some robberies in our gated community some years ago, and we were convinced it was people coming in, sneaking in somehow. No, it was someone in our own community who was committing the robberies. So it's not like evil has a price point. I mean, there are very rich people, as we all know, who are evil, and that doesn't protect you. Not that I'm very, very rich, I'm in a rich community, but there's a sense of security that comes from gates that is entirely false.
Well, when you consider the vast number of security people, and certainly over the last couple of years when the online shopping and delivery systems have been, hugely elevated, you could have UPS trucks, Amazon trucks, any number of delivery, the post
The Amazon
office.
driver just waves as he comes in. But there's also like lightning delivery or others that Amazon contracts to,
Yeah.
and they just come in and out, and nobody stops to check who they are, or if there might be somebody else in the back of the truck. And also you have those trucks full of gardening people. No one's checking the number of people on those trucks going in and out. Were there 4 coming in and now 3 coming out? We don't know. It's not that kind of security. It's not the Pentagon. And believe me, I knew I was head of the security team at my gated community, and I certainly knew all of the holes in our system.
Well, I mean, we live in a gated community, and I realize that almost every day we give out the gate code, to Stanley Steamer coming to clean the tile, or, the pool guy has it, and the gardener has it, and, Amazon, UPS, we don't give them out, but they clearly have ways to override it. So it's a completely porous community, even though it does have, in theory, gates. And then every once in a while, because it's electronic, the gates fail. They either fail open or they fail closed, which is much more awkward, because then
We have guards. They aren't armed, but we do have guards in my community and all the communities in Calabasas, actually. So that also gives you a false sense of security, just because there's someone in a uniform in the front. And we do have cameras that look at license plates coming in and out, but that hasn't entirely prevented robberies or rapes or murders. But I would say 9 times out of 10, those crimes are committed by the people who are actually in the community, it seems.
Well, I do think that, having the license plate pictures and some kind of a log of people going in and out is helpful. I mean, if you read a lot of British crime, you realize that it's almost impossible to move anywhere in the United Kingdom without being covered by CCTV. If you watch any British crime shows on television, that's the first thing they ask. If you're watching Vera, or if it's Scott and Bailey, or if it's, I'm trying to remember what the one is, so busy, that Line of Duty or whatever it is. Very first thing they do is pull video from all these cameras and start checking.
Of course, now with COVID-19, everyone's got a hoodie and a mask on. It's sort of screwing up the whole point of CCTV.
Well, you mean the mask? Yeah, I know, but you can at least check vehicles. And then, you know, the other thing is that unless everybody's smart enough to leave their phone, if you're a wrongdoer and abandon your phone, they can also track you, you know, track your location. And they can get records of all the numbers that you have called or that have called you. So, you know, if you're going to be a real criminal, and this comes into play. In fact, in gated prairie, if you be a real criminal, what you need is a ton of burner phones, because otherwise, you know, you're just holding up your hand and saying, "Here I am, come get me." Right. So you really needed to stay ahead of technology in this book, or at least deal with it. Right.
Absolutely, absolutely. By the way, I don't know if you know this, but you know, Matt is not a complete stranger to me, or vice versa. He and I have known each other for, I'm afraid to say how long, 30 years, Matt?
Yep.
At least 30
Give us
years.
some background on Matt, since we don't know Matt. Matt, what
He was a male stripper who moved into writing.
Seriously,
Well, Lee has been a very positive force in my life for years, among other things.
I got him out of stripping. I said, "You're better than this,
stripping.
Matt."
He also got me a job in Germany, teaching German writers, TV writers. That was really
that was fun,
tremendous fun. And then also he recommended the necklace to the publisher. So that was very helpful also. So yeah, Lee and I go way back because, you know, we both write for TV and we both write novels and we both write movies. And so, you know,
we're also very sexy Jewish guys.
Two sexy Jewish guys. So we have a lot to talk about.
Aren't all Jewish guys sexy by definition, Lee?
Yes. Thank you for acknowledging the obvious there, Barbara. That's absolutely true.
I'm married to one, so what can I possibly say? Right. In fact, I will say that in Eve Ronan's life, Lee's background as a screenwriter is important, because due to various events in Eve's life, she has the potential for becoming becoming the focus of a series. So that's not really a spoiler, Lee. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Eve? We could give her some background here. And
one of my fascinations about the police procedural today is how influenced it is by the media, or how police work is influenced by the media, especially in Los Angeles. You think about TV shows and movies being shot on backlots, but in fact, the entire city of Los Angeles is a backlot. Every street has been in some TV show, either as LA or somewhere else. And police officers are very aware of this. They're also very aware that everyone has a camera in their hand. So at any moment, you can become a social media star. So Eve has to deal with her own expectations of her behavior, her fellow cops' expectations of her behavior, the media's expectations of her behavior, and now the idealized version of herself in a TV series. How is she going to deal with all those different versions of herself and find who she really is? And I think that's not as hypothetical as I make it sound. I think cops are dealing with that every day as well. We all watch CSI and all these shows, and we expect that to be reality. I mean, look at CSI. We expect miracles with forensics. One cop that Matt and I know real well, and you may know him too, Paul Bishop, was telling me that remember on Miami Vice and NYPD Blue, all these guys are wearing their badges around their necks. That was something that came out of TV. That some costume designer came up with as a cool way of showing people are police officers, and cops saw that and said, "Hey, that's cool," and they started wearing that around their necks. So it really is a symbiotic relationship, and I just wanted to play with that in my book.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that if you're in Los Angeles, that would be true. But you know, it's true in London. It's true in a lot of other cities. I mean, New York is obviously, again, practically all of New York has been a background for some kind of movie. I mean, I've been in New York when, you know, everything freezes and we're in Central Park and we're watching, it could be a cartoon guy. I'm trying to remember there was some children's thing with an animated animal. I can't remember what, that wanders around Central Park. And so I happened to go by it. And it's a whole thing. It's not just the background, it's the food trucks and, you know, all of the support stuff that is there. And so for New Yorkers, it's a way of life. The Wall Street Journal actually wrote up a house and mansions on Friday. They have these ridiculous houses and ridiculous prices. But anyway, there was one couple that paid an absurd amount of money for a brownstone, I think it was in Brooklyn, with the intention of renting it out to TV. You know, in other words, the house was going to become an economic asset for this couple because it was going to be so good for filming stuff.
I don't know how it is with Matt's neighborhood, because I know he has a lot of entertainment industry people where he lives. But in my gated community, we don't allow filming because many people in my community are in the industry. And the last thing we want is a film crew in our neighborhood because we know the damage that they do. Do they allow film crews?
We have film crews here in Pacific Palisades too, for sure. And there's probably about 5 times a year where the streets around our house are completely blocked off and, you know, you have to park kind of far away. But, you know, I think like the toughest image thing cops have now is like not only the fictional shows, but, you know, the real life stuff, you know, the real life police shootings that get covered. And then, you know, the cops have to deal with people perceiving them in that way. And, you know, that's a whole other level of reality.
Yeah, they're wearing body cams and, you know, real live action stuff goes on. And in fact, in Eve's story, Lee, it isn't just Eve that has to think about the media, but you've got at least one cop in the sheriff's department who's kind of a media whore, you know, and he's a problem for them because, and also I'm trying to remember, is it in this one, but oftentimes it's the guys way up the line. They don't want to look bad, their optics. And so, you know, they're performing like the assistant commissioner or whatever it all is, are very sensitive to media. And that influences how investigations go.
Is infamous for the whole Mel Gibson thing and Latrice Richardson. And there've been a lot of scandals involving Lost Hill Station providing celebrities with preferential treatment or not giving them enough interest when they commit a crime or disturb the peace, or there's a report about them committing violence. There's a real issue because a lot of cops, I shouldn't say a lot, most cops are very good, don't get me wrong, but there are cops who are very aware of the power of Hollywood and a soft landing they can get when they retire if they get a security job in Hollywood or sell their story to Hollywood or are consultants on a television show. I mean, it was even in James Ellroy's book. I can't remember what it was called, Matt, that became the movie with Kevin Spacey, where Kevin Spacey was a suck-up detective wanting to get.
Well, I've certainly met
Dragnet.
You know, I've certainly met police officers that were wanted to become writers and were asking me for advice and looking for help and taking my classes at UCLA Extension. And I'm sure you've had a lot of cops too that, you know, want to be writers one day. And you know.
Oh, we have Joseph Wamba, and in fact, 30 years ago, well, 32 years ago, because the Poison Pen is 32 years old now. I wish I were 32, but it doesn't work out that way. But there were a lot of cop novels, as we call them. Many of them were written by police officers, you know, and now maybe they go for TV more than they go for writing novels. Would that be true?
I think so. There's so many cop shows on TV, and I know Matt was on Law and Order, and you guys had police consultants on that show, didn't you?
Yeah, we had a guy named Struck. I think that was his name. He became famous for, well, I won't go into it.
Well, I've always had police consultants on the shows I've been on, and when I was doing Diagnosis Murder, we had, you know, Doug Lyle and other doctors that were advising us. I know when you were on House, Matt, you had doctors who were advising, and there are a lot of doctors who want to write books. I think everybody in any profession where they encounter intense human conflict and intense emotion are aware of the storytelling possibilities and want to share it.
Yeah, well, our mutual friend, Paul Bishop, former cop with the LAPD, he and I pitched a TV show to various networks and to Bruckheimer Productions, and nobody bought it. However, about 8 months later, the producer from Bruckheimer called him up and said, "Paul, ever since I met you, I haven't been able to get you out of my mind." So he was like, "Well, you know, I'm married." Anyway, she wanted him to try out for a reality show on TV. And he wound up actually getting that job. And so he was on ABC. He was the star. He was the lead character in an ABC reality show for 8 episodes. And he was just retiring at the time. So it was like he leaves the LAPD and immediately, boom, he's got this incredibly lucrative job being a star on an ABC show.
Yeah, Paul wrote several episodes of Diagnosis Murder for me, and he said it was the first time he made more as a writer than as a cop. I'll tell you a funny story. He and I also went out and pitched a series around town, and we were in a meeting with a very high-powered executive. And Paul has 2 faces, the average guy face and then the cop. And it's like an on and off switch. And we went into this pitch, and Paul turned into the cop. And he was just giving this executive this death stare. The temperature in the room went up and the pressure, and he was killing the pitch. And I went outside and said, Paul, what's the matter with you? And he said, that producer, I can tell you, my cop radar was going off. He's a dishonest scumbag. I said, of course he is. He's a television producer and executive. He's totally untrustworthy and insincere. No, I'm sure if I run him through the system, he's guilty of something. I said, I don't care. When you go to these pitches, you can't be interrogating the guy we're trying to sell to. You got to turn off your cop radar. But he was incapable of doing that.
He is a master interrogator. He teaches interrogation to the FBI now that he's retired. And yeah, he would pretend to interrogate the executives in my pitch. And what you said about the temperature going down, oh man, it really did.
And in fact, in Gated Prey, there's a big interrogation sequence, and everything in that I learned from attending a bunch of Paul's. Paul's great. He invited me to the LAPD training for a couple of days to take part in the interrogation. Now my daughter can't lie to me, but it was great. I've seen Paul give the short version of his interrogation seminar, the day-long version, and the multiple-day one, and it's great, and it's informed my writing, but it's also terrified me because I didn't want to tell him a little lie like, you look great today, Paul, when he does it, because he'll know I'm lying and he'll shoot me.
Well, there are cops who do great stories. There are lawyers who accumulate great stories and write books. The only people that don't write books very, very seldom are judges. They really don't. There's Robert Travers in Anatomy of a Murder, William Coughlin, who I can't remember the title, but he wrote a couple of really great books. There was a British judge whose books I absolutely love, whose pseudonym was Cyril Hare, and he wrote my all-time favorite legal mystery, in which was set in the early 1930s. So the judge still rode on circuit in England with trumpeters before him, and he actually still sat on a woolsack.
There's David Ellis. He's a judge in Illinois. He writes.
He is, but he wasn't when he won the Edgar. He was a lawyer, and then he's gone on writing some books with James Patterson, but his legal career kind of took over. But judges are their training is different, and their look at stories is different. So they don't very often write fiction. But anyway, we digress. So Gated Prey. The one case we could talk about are the home invasion robberies. And that's where we see just how porous the security is in this gated community. And you want to describe, I like the setup. There's a kind of a stakeout that fails in part because of Eve's complicated background with the rest of her department.
Well, one of the things I'm trying to do in each book is to do something entirely different. So if one book ended with big action, I don't have the second book end with big action or the next one. And I just wanted to shake things up. So I have the biggest action in this book at the beginning. I start hot with a big action sequence, which a sting that does not go anywhere near as planned. And I thought that'd be a lot of fun, but also more realistic, because in most TV shows and books, the cops plan a sting and it goes just perfectly. They're able to predict all the different elements that can happen. But in real life, you can't predict all the possible elements that will happen, all things that can go wrong. And basically the house that the sting takes place in is mine. Just because it was the pandemic, I didn't have to do much research, but just by walking out to get my mail, I could do my research. And I'm astonished in my neighborhood that there are people who pay so much money for state-of-the-art security systems that they don't turn on or have big blank spots. And I keep saying the rich. I'm not rich. I couldn't afford my neighborhood now, but the rich can be very arrogant and very stupid at the same time. What's the point of the big fancy security system if you don't even turn it on, if you leave your door unlocked? And the pool people and the landscapers and everybody else in the community, they're very aware of who has lax security and who doesn't, who's out of town and who's not. People are very casual inside the gated communities about their own security and how much information they're unwillingly sharing with strangers. And I wanted to highlight some of that in the book. And I thought also gated communities are something that have not been explored in much detail in fiction.
It's also true that many people don't realize that they give away their lives, their absences, the whole bit on social media. They're on Facebook saying, here we are in Sorrento and, showing this gorgeous place. And of course, any idiot can then determine they're not at home. And I mean, I have to admit that we have a security system, and because we now have puppies, we're not turning it on, and they're not going to be great at repelling invaders. The older dog terrifies anybody. She's not nearly as fierce as she sounds, but as she tries to eat her way through the glass front door, you can see the Amazon UPS guys backing up, but the puppies aren't going to be any help. So I do worry that we're being a little bit lax, but you're absolutely right. You trust your service people. You trust them to open your back gate and come in. You've got the pool guy, you've got the gardener, you've got the housekeeper, you've got whatever it all is. And your life is not nearly as private as you think it is. You also make the point that most of the cameras are turned outward. They're looking at perimeter threat. They're not really looking at interiors. So they're not that useful if something happens inside the house. Is that, is your own security like that? Or
I don't have any cameras inside my house. Oh, crap. Now the thieves will know. But,
I was thinking that both of you guys are kind of in trouble now.
yeah.
Right. Well, in any case, so what we have is these home invasions or home robberies going on. And so Eve Ronan and her partner, who's Duncan, who a whole theme in this book is that he's retiring in only so many days. So he's pretty casual about repercussions and other stuff because, he just doesn't care anymore. What are they going to do? Fire him when he's almost there? Anyway, they're set up in the house, and it depends upon monitoring from back at the station. And because, or at least we think it is, because the cop assigned to monitor it isn't at his post, when the invasion comes, there isn't any backup and things go bad in a big hurry.
Well,
And
I don't know if you're familiar with all the
people die.
scandals with the LA County Sheriff's Department now. There's so many, but a big one is about these secret gangs within the Sheriff's Department of police officers who have tattoos representing their precincts, their stations. But the tattoos are very racist and violent. And there's a lot of attention being focused on the LAPD's racist cliques and white supremacist cliques that are targeting gang members and others, not just gang members, but people of color and different backgrounds for intense enforcement. And it's a real problem. And when I first wrote the book, there were some people who read it who said, oh, aren't you exaggerating? No, I was underplaying it compared to what's coming out now. And it's scary. It's really scary. And not everybody who has that tattoo. I met a police deputy, not with the LA County Sheriff's Department, who was telling me that it's not uncommon, just like in the military, for you to get a tattoo that represents your troop or your battalion or your station or your county or your city to show pride in your badge and pride in your unit or what have you. And some people have taken that badge as gang colors, essentially. They've corrupted it. So not every sheriff's deputy who has a tattoo is necessarily corrupt. But now it's casting a bad light on every single deputy in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department.
if you were to watch any of Line of Duty, the British crime show, they have a whole anti-corruption unit, which is called AC-12. And the whole premise of the show is that cops get corrupted, whether they were bad to start with or whether some event occurs and they, take that first step down the slippery slope and then it all goes to hell, whatever it is. So I don't think that LA has a monopoly on potential corruption in the department. It just, that's what you're writing about. There's a second crime that happens in gated prey, and we can't talk about it at all, but let's just say that there is something else that goes on in this community that is pretty dire, and that Eve, because she's there, gets sucked into, and then we go on from there. And that's the one that really got me. I have to tell you, Lee. I'm depressed to think that that's even a crime.
That's we can't go into it, but it's based on a real story I heard about. And then I went and talked to the detectives who investigated, and they're still haunted by it to this day. The challenge was writing about it without it turning off all my readers. And it was a thin line, a delicate balance,
Yeah.
not to be offensive and gory, and it was tough. But it was such an unusual crime that I hadn't ever encountered before. I don't think most people have, that I wanted to write about it.
No, I hadn't. I certainly hadn't. And I'm horrified to know that it actually has a name, you know, meaning that it might have happened more than once. I'd like to have thought it was unique, but turns out if it has a name, probably people have encountered it. Yuck. So let's go back to Matt. Tell me how you pronounce Susan's name, her last name, Matt.
Susan Lentigo.
Okay. And she is the mother of Amy, or was the mother of Amy, who is now been gone for over 20 years. And Susan is a waitress in a small town in Upper New York. And as we earlier discussed, the man that killed Amy is about to be executed in, is it North Dakota?
Yep.
And so she really can't afford to go there. So she gets some kind of support. So what happens to the point that we can talk about it?
Well, she goes to the bar, and the local band, the most popular local band, does a fundraiser for her, and she's able to raise $900, which is enough for her to start on this trip. She and her mom, who lives with her, have only $100 to their name before they get this $900 infusion. So Susan gives $50 to her mom so she can buy groceries for the week while Susan is out traveling to North Dakota. So she travels to North Dakota, and she meets a lot of good people on the way. First, she meets the guy who works at the garage in town, who fixes her car for free. Otherwise, it would have cost her $200. So this is a huge deal. She also meets some people that, don't do her right. She keeps all her money inside her coat pockets. She keeps the $20 bills and paper clips over here, and $10 bills and paper clips over there inside her coat. Somebody steals it all. So now she's lost all her money. And also she gets into a car accident. So she's lost her car. So she still has to make it to North Dakota, with no money, no car. She's able to get a bus ticket, but she has no food. So in order to really, survive this journey, she has to depend to some extent on the kindness of strangers, and also her own ability to, scrounge food at bus station coffee shops. So it's kind of a book that, it's really, more than anything, it's about her courage and her strength, and her finding the courage inside herself that she never thought that she had. She's got so many obstacles, no money. She's got to get out there. And at a certain point, she realizes she has to rethink everything that she's been thinking for the last 20 years about her life. And and her daughter died. So but she manages to overcome all of this and have the strength to really try to do the right thing and figure out what really happened before Saturday at 5:30, when it's possible that the man is innocent and he's going to be executed. So that's the main thrust of it.
Well, that's the famous thriller Ticking Clock, that guys like Jeffrey Deaver personify. It's going to be 30 minutes till midnight, and we have to work it out. I didn't think that the book would have worked if Susan hadn't been a character living on the margins, so to speak. It's because she is, forced into depending on people helping her in whatever. If this had been an easy trip where she could have just zipped into the car and driven to North Dakota, none of this would have happened. Now, the FBI, obviously, because it was a federal crime, as you point out, because the daughter Amy was transported over state lines, the FBI worked the case, but they've closed the case, right?
Yeah, they've closed the case. They're sure that the guy who got convicted 20 years ago or 19 years ago is guilty. So he's been, appealing for the past 19 years. Obviously it takes a long time for people who are facing the death penalty to actually get executed. So they've closed the case. What you were saying about her being poor, that's one thing I really liked about writing this book, because I read a lot of thrillers. I read thrillers all the time, and like candy. And, usually they involve people who are in their 20s and 30s. Usually they're women, who like have glamorous jobs in big cities. You know, they live in New York, they live in some other big city, and they work in a really cool industry, fashion or showbiz or publishing. You know, something really fun, and they have money, and so to write a thriller that was about you know a different kind of person, a different kind of economics, and also an older person. It just, I enjoyed reading it. And I think, you know, many readers have mentioned to me that they just really enjoy, you know, being different in that way for people. Yeah, so that's, yeah, but the FBI, they've closed the case for sure. You know, it's not that they did anything bad. You know, they thought they caught the right guy. You know, they're not bad cops. They just, they're
not interested in revisiting it. I mean, they have to have a real kick in the butt if they are going to revisit it. Of course, thrillers generally involve movement, because thrillers are really a case of a protagonist and an antagonist. Is a whole lot different than a mystery that's like enclosed in a gated community, for example. And so, you know, oftentimes they do involve people with money and so forth, because they involve travel, or they involve all kinds of stuff where money is important. Some of them have phenomenal budgets. Some of the military thrillers, for example, or, you know, thrillers where somebody works for the government, they seem to summon up helicopters and private jets, you know, and all and international travels, no problem.
And whatever. I enjoy that. You know, I love these books with these glamorous.
Me too. But it is interesting to read about somebody who, you know, for $900 is a life-changing sum, who
and
has
these
a car that isn't at all clear that she can actually drive from New York to North Dakota. And in fact, as we find out, doesn't work out. So she has to ride the bus. You know, it takes enormous courage for her, just as it would somebody in far more affluent situations to so there's a whole mom thing going on there. There's a whole parental thing. This was her child, and she wasn't able to protect her. And, you know, so why is it important to her to see the execution? Why does it matter to her that she goes to North Dakota? Because if she doesn't care, there's no point in the story.
You know, it might sound a bit corny, but it's the truth. She just feels like she might get closure. And both the real life person and the character in my book, they say, you know, he was there, you know, when my daughter breathed her last breath. I'm going to be there when he breathes his last breath. And I'm going to put my face right up to the window, so the last thing he sees in this world is me. So that's the surface reason of what she's doing. That's the surface reason. There's an underneath reason, which is she's always felt that there was something screwy about this murder, that she didn't quite understand. There was something that wasn't quite right. She just has this sense in her that just something doesn't feel right about it. The guy who is going to be executed, he did make a confession, but then he retracted the confession. He's never, you know, admitted it. She just has this sense that there's something about his story that wasn't quite right. She doesn't know what it is, but part of the reason she wants to go there is to look in his eye and have him, you know, confess to her, yes, I killed your daughter. This is why I did it. This is where, I think this is not a spoiler. This I'm positive isn't. This is where I hid the necklace that your daughter had, and when she was dying. She's got to do this. She just has to do this. She's been like living in a state of like suspended animation to some extent for the last 20 years, like not really being able to go out with guys and just not being able to move forward with her life. And so this is her mission. And that was really true of the real life person. And it's also true of Susan.
So having written this book, are you inspired to write another book?
You know, about her, people ask me.
No, not necessarily about her. It's just another book. You know, you're a screenwriter, TV script writer, and so forth. But no, this is a novel.
Yeah. You know, I used to write novels 20 years ago before I moved out to Hollywood. I got 4 novels that were published by Signet back then. They were humorous amateur sleuth mysteries. And then I went to write for TV for, 18 years. Law and Order, House, Pretty Little Liars, CSI Miami, Women's Murder Club, Supernatural, a bunch of shows. But in the last 4 years, I kind of, writing for TV is great, but you're always writing somebody else's vision unless you created the show yourself. And writing a novel, I get to write something that I'm super passionate about. So The Necklace, for whatever reason, and I could describe why I think I was passionate about it, but for whatever reason, I was super passionate about this woman's story. It was a story I really wanted to tell. And so I've just written another novel that is going to get published at the end of next year, the beginning of the following year. It's been called Clickbait, but I will probably change the title because now there's a TV series called Clickbait, and I have some candidates for a new title. But in any case, that's going to be published soon, and it's about just very briefly, it's about a young woman who is she just got fired from her 4th newspaper job in a row, laid off because newspapers lay off everybody. And so she decides to revive her career by doing a cold case podcast about a murder that she knows about, somebody that she knows that got killed 3 years ago. So she does this podcast, and the book is really about people that do podcasts or journalists in general. There's a tension between really going for the truth and getting a lot of clicks, And so it's about that tension between them. So yeah, I'm writing that, and that's going to come out. And then now I'm writing the 3rd novel. So that's really what I love doing now, and I'm sure Lee has experienced this too, but when you write your own novel, man, it's your own vision, it's your own dream, everything, you feel, inside you, it's what you're passionate about. And anyway, I enjoy doing it.
That's the upside.
It's not about committee.
That's not telling you the downside, which is one of the greatest things about writing for television is, and it's also one of the worst things, but one of the greatest things is you're in a room with really clever, great storytellers, and it forces you to be at your very best at the top of your game. And if you do have an idea and you can't quite get it where it needs to be, there's someone else who will push it there for you. And it's great to have that give and take and other points of view that have you thinking in ways you wouldn't think on your own. It's also good that when you have trouble with a script, you can knock on another writer's door and say, hey, we discussed the story a couple of days ago in the room, and there's one thing I'm really having trouble with. Maybe you can help me. And they do. The problem with being a novelist is you're by yourself. And I keep asking my dog for story advice, and he doesn't give me any. I miss that interaction. I miss the free lunches. I miss going into an office. But like Matt, I love that it's all mine. It's a unique vision. It's my voice. But I also really miss all those other writers in the room. And
well, you should join my writing group, our writing group. I'm in a writing group that meets most Fridays at 10 a.m. And I'm in another writing group that meets about every other Sunday at 7 p.m. So, I'll come in and I'll bring a chapter of my latest book and I read it out loud to people, and they'll give me great ideas. And it's great. It's like having a writer's room. It really is. And then all kinds of things like Lee and I both, when we finish a novel, we give it to people to read. The Necklace, for instance, it used to be that all the stuff that took place 20 years ago, I put at the beginning of the book, the first, 120 pages. And then the next part of the book was everything that occurs now. I gave it to a friend of mine, Sagit Meyer-Schwartz, a writer, and she said, why don't you intersperse it? A chapter of the past, chapter of the present, chapter of the present, past and the present. And it was like, oh yeah, of course. Why didn't I think of that? But, I don't know. I agree with Lee. You got to, it's really, important or helpful to get feedback from other people. So as a novelist, I've sort of duplicated some aspects of the writer's room. But I do have to say, I love, in the morning, I ride my bike to the coffee shop outside now because of COVID, but I go to the outside part of the coffee shop and I just write by myself for 3 hours. And then it's just the greatest way to start the day. And you're on your own. And I don't know, I love it.
It's so weird. I don't know why this is. I have no problem, as Matt well knows, showing scripts to writer friends of mine and getting feedback. None at all. I have never shown a novel to
in progress.
No. And I've toyed, actually, we've talked about it. I've toyed about showing you my new novel and some other friends of mine because I've got some concerns about it, but I just can't bring myself to do it. It's I don't know. With a script, it's easy. I just have, I guess, because I've been in so many writers' rooms and had so many other fingers on my scripts before, and a screenplay is so communal. It's a document that other professionals use to do their jobs. It's a blueprint for a building being built that other contractors are using. That by its nature, it's going to be shared.
Well, maybe
it comes out, so to speak. Whereas a novel, I don't know. It's such a unique personal vision. It's just weird. had a real problem showing it to anybody ahead of time. Though I have a technique I've been doing now where I write my books first as a script just to get out of my system, just to make sure the story works. And it's great because then I have a 120-page detailed outline for the book, and I can then kind of color between the lines. I don't have to worry about plotting or even what the people are going to say, because that's taken care of. I can
Well,
concentrate on other
you and Bill Fitzhugh taught me that strategy because, for instance, with The Necklace, first I wrote it, as you know, as a screenplay. Then I wrote a draft as a novel. Then I wrote the second draft as a screenplay. Then the second draft as a novel. So yeah, so I did that. Right now I'm writing a TV pilot based on another novel that I'm writing. So yeah, it's great to go back and forth. But maybe Lee, maybe your first drafts of your novels are so brilliant you don't need to have somebody read it. With me, they kind of suck. I have to have people help me out.
I read The Necklace as a script, and when I read it, I called Matt up and I said, Matt, I have my notes on your script, but if this thing doesn't go forward, you've got to write it as a book. It would be a great book. And I nagged him for how many years to a book. And then,
well, you're telling a story there. You didn't have to nag me too long, but you did nag me. It's true. You did nag me. And the script, by the way, is optioned by Appian Way and Leonardo DiCaprio's company. So the script is going forward too. So it's kind of fun to have both going, simultaneously. But yeah, anyway, it's being a novelist is an interesting game, and it's just a joy. I don't know.
Oh, you've written so many books, and some of them were in somebody else's universe, like the Monk books and so forth. And we've talked about the books you've been writing on your own for quite some time. Eve is newer, and this is your third book. Do you intend to go on writing books about her, or are you going to branch off again into somebody else?
I would love to keep writing about Eve. The fourth book's already written and finished. It'll be out in June. It's called Movie Land. And all 4 books take place over a period of about 3.5 months. So they're very compressed. You could read all 4, and it reads like one big novel because only a couple of days or a couple of weeks pass between each book. So it's sort of one full storyline. And there are some people who've complained to me that there are some strands that weren't tied up in book number 2. They're tied up in book number 4. And there are some strands in Gated Prey they're tied up later. One thing I like about Eve, or one of the many things I like about her, is she's so inexperienced. She makes huge mistakes. She's got innate skill, but she's unskilled in how to use that skill. Can I say skill more than 3 or 4 times in a sentence? So I have a lot of ways to go before she's Harry Bosch or John Rebus, where she's super confident in her abilities and she's always right and she knows where she's going and what she's doing. And I want to have that time. I mean, I could write about Eve for 10 or 15 more books, assuming people keep buying them. I think whether there's a 5th Eve Ronin will depend on how well Gated Prey does and what the pre-orders are like for Movie Land. But in the meantime, I have just finished, I shouldn't say just, I have a little more work to do tonight, but a standalone thriller that I'm unsure about. And I haven't shown it to anybody yet, and it's a stretch for me. So we'll see what happens. Maybe that'll be my next book. If not, I owe my publisher another book by July, so I'll have to come up with something pretty quick.
Well, there's a lot of schools of thought, but if you really want Eve to succeed, you shouldn't interrupt her story cycle with other work, because
I agree with you. But, my publisher.
I think of all the things you've written, I like Eve the best. I think she has the most potential for long-term development. There's so many things about her that you've set up, but can still explore.
You're not alone. The book has been, the Eve Ronin books have been not only my most commercially successful, but my most critically successful, but more importantly, the most successful with my wife. As far as my wife is concerned, I should only be writing
with your bookseller. So, don't discount that. But seriously, I think, I always remember, and I say this to people, Rex Stout wrote 49 books before he wrote the first Nero Wolfe book. Think about that. And, sometimes it takes a lot of writing and a lot of different approaches and all before you finally, you sort of click on a character that has that kind of potential. And I think about Larry Block, who wrote God knows how many different things and God knows how many different pseudonyms, some of them female. And then he wrote Matt Scudder, and then he wrote Bernie, you know, and those are the two things that that really stick, at least with me. With Larry, the Scudder books, which were amazing. And I really enjoyed Bernie Rodenbar, and all the rest of it, it was there, but you know, it's sort of like ephemera as far as I'm concerned. And
I feel the same way you do, and I'd like you to notarize what you just told me and send it to my publisher.
Well, I talk to your publisher fairly often, so I'll be happy to give
Drive it home. Drive it
Don't
home.
worry.
Give me a
But
contract
I'm
for
really
book number
serious.
5.
I think that Eve, the whole setup that you've done, really deserves a lot more development, you know, a lot more books. But what happens with readers is if you suddenly throw in a totally different book, it derails them. So, you know.
Excuse me while I go delete my novel.
You publish it under a pseudonym, like Block.
I thought about that.
It's just kind of a commercial thing. And I understand why people don't want to write about the same characters all the time. And occasionally they want to do something different, you know, but I'm not sure that Eve has had enough books for you to interrupt her flow.
You're talking like it's a choice of mine. I wrote the standalone book because I didn't know if my publisher was going to order more Eve Ronins. And Eve Ronin was written on spec, Lost Hills, when I was doing the Ian Ludlows. I didn't know if there was going to be another Ian Ludlow book. So both True Fiction and Lost Hills were both books I wrote on spec. And now there's this other book I've written waiting to hear whether or not I'm going to be doing a 5th Eve Ronin. So gotcha. If they order a 5th, you know, this one will be set aside or maybe published by a different imprint at Amazon or by another publisher, who knows? I mean, it's not way outside the field I've been writing in. It's crime, but just a different take on a crime story.
Well, I liked Ian Ludlow. I thought he was fun, but I don't know that I thought he was going to go the distance the way I think that Eve will. And as you point out, there are lots of things that you've put into them that still can be developed, you know, down the road. And I think that's what makes a really interesting series. You don't want everything you know about this character, you know, to be revealed. So the reader doesn't have any reason to say, wow, you know, I want to read the next one to find out about whatever it might be.
Well, I think this comes out of the world that Matt and I share. When you're doing a TV series, you come up with a pilot, you have to come up with an idea that can generate 110 episodes.
Right.
So you need a lot of conflicts that are unresolved or a lot of conflicts that are constantly going to be sparking to generate 110 compelling stories, or there's no series. So when I sat down to do Eve Ronin, I purposely came up with a world rife with conflict, so I would have lots more stories to tell. I get bored when there's no conflict, when there's no more shadings or situations to explore. And I think that's true of many TV series. They sometimes go way past the point where it's interesting. And I know both Matt and I have been on shows like that, where we come on at that point where everything has run into the ground. I mean, how many times can you mine that same conflict? Will they sleep together? Won't they sleep together? He's a slob. He's a neat freak. You know, she's a believer. He's not. Whatever. You got to find other levels. And with the Eve Ronin books, there are so many other levels that it would be malpractice if I couldn't do 10 books with this character.
Well, you know, if she's young and growing, then, you know, you have a lot of potential there that you can develop without, it doesn't even have to be conflict so much as, you know, who's she going to turn into, which I think is wonderful. I am really sorry that we cannot talk about the 2 plots in Gated Prey all the way to the end. It really, I think they're amazing. And frankly, one of them is truly horrifying. That's not in the violent sense, but you just can't even imagine anybody committing this particular crime. It's really a terrific book. So
Thank you very much.
Let me call Patrick up and see what he might have to ask you, or whether there are any questions.
I have a question for Matt, though. Did you go to North Dakota, Matt, to research the book?
That's the one piece of research that I did not do.
I've never been, you know, it's the only state in the union I haven't been in. I'm serious.
It's probably great.
It's probably great.
There was a question for Matt, but has the necklace been optioned? Did you already
I did answer that. It's been optioned by Appy and Way and Cartel Pictures.
Okay, great.
And
Yeah.
some nobody named Leonardo D. What? D.
Thank you.
DiCaprio.
Oh, it's an
DiCaprio.
Italian guy, right?
Yes.
It's gonna. I think it would be a really interesting movie. I don't see it as long form television. Do you? I
Nope.
see it as a film.
Yeah, I wrote it. I wrote the screenplay and definitely as a film. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lee, was your first novel, My Gun Has Bullets?
No. My first novel was 357 Vigilante by Ian Ludlow. Ian for Ian Fleming. Ludlow, so be on the shelf next to Robert Ludlum. And they were sleazy men's action adventure novels. I don't know if you know what those are. Those are
Oh, yeah.
titles like The Destroyer, The Executioner,
Sure.
The Immolator, The Defecator, The Drooler. They
John
were the men's
Pendleton.
version of Harlequin romances. They're very popular in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yeah.
And my books were sold in finer 7-Elevens and gas stations around the country.
Right.
When did you write your first one?
I was 18. I wrote it
Really?
when I was in college. I wrote it in my classes. I had a professor named Louis Perdue who wrote those big, bulky
Yeah.
Robert Ludlum-esque conspiracy thrillers, and he would show me his manuscripts, and I'd criticize them. And I'd criticize the sex, even though I hadn't had any. I'd criticize the foreign locales, even though I'd never been outside of Walnut Creek, California. I had lots of opinions, and he listened to them. And then one day, his publisher asked him if he would write one of these men's action adventure series, and he said he wasn't hungry enough, stupid enough, or desperate enough, but he knew somebody who was, and he recommended me. And I wrote an
Stupid, the
outline,
key
and a
word.
sample chapter. They bought it. I wrote 4 of them. The first book came out the same week this guy Bernard Getz blew away some muggers on a New York subway train. So vigilantes were hot. New World Pictures bought the movie rights, hired me to write the script, and my screenwriting career was born. And then I went off on the screenwriting path and didn't get back to writing books until one of my novels was nominated for an Edgar Award. And my agent said, that's like the Oscar of mystery writing. If you want to write an outline, a sample chapter, I can get you a 3-book deal by the end of the week. And he did. And I got a deal with St. Martin's Press in the early 90s to write some books, which you really championed, Patrick. My Gun Has Bullets and
Yeah.
Beyond the Beyond.
Yep, absolutely. No, it's funny because I think I first met you when you were here in the was it 95, 96,
Yeah.
something like that for My Gun Has Bullets?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Let's see. Some of your fans are having a good time in the comments field. Let's see. Actually, what question for Barbara? What kind of puppies do you have? Do you want
What kind of puppies are they? They are Cavapoos. They are litter mates. And we were, I have to say, complete suckers because the woman who bred them, we fastened upon the little male who's got an adorable face. And she said that she would bring them up because I can't remember, she gave some reason, but of course I realized that like any good breeder, she wanted to see if we were going to be a decent home for these pets. What she did find out was that there's kind of an age limit where people want to entrust their puppies to owners. And I was way over the age limit, but she didn't figure that out. She told me a story about delivering puppies to Sun City West with a couple that were going to be 70. She thought that was too old to adopt puppies. So after we had adopted the puppies, I said to her, how old do you think I am? She was so horrified. But anyway, what she did was she brought along the last of the litter. And it's a little girl, and she's totally different looking. She's all black. You can barely see her face if you look at her because her eyes are black, her face is black. There's like no white involved, so she's almost invisible if you try to take a photo of her. And my heart was wrung because I thought this little dog, nobody's going to love her, nobody's going to want her. And she was so attached to the little male that we loved. So I said to Rob, we really should adopt them both. And we did.
You can take our dogs.
Well, they're so different, but anyway, they were only 3 months old and they only weighed 4 pounds each. So it's been, I have revisited my time as a young mother, laundry every day, diaper duty, cleaning up pee every day, not diapers, but it's been fairly exhausting, but a huge amount of fun and really, probably has prodded us out of the COVID-induced kind of lethargy, that we all have, where we haven't really left home or talked to many people or been all that active. And if you're chasing puppies, you're really active. So I think it's been a good thing, but I recognize that she really got us when she showed up with the 2 dogs. It was just like, hold up our hands, sucker, right here.
Somebody's asking about Monk, and it seems like this is like Monk would be perfect for this pandemic era. He's been waiting for it. He's ready.
Very true.
Well, they recorded the cast of Monk reunited for a COVID special, just 15 minutes. You can find it on YouTube.
Oh, really?
On Facebook. It's great.
Oh, no kidding. Did you write it?
No, I had nothing to do with it. I did not create Monk. It was created by Andy Breckman, a brilliant writer. And he was kind enough to lend the character to me for 15 novels. And I wrote 4 episodes too with William Rabkin. And I loved writing it, but 15 was enough. Yeah.
It's a long time to live in somebody else's universe, isn't it?
Yeah, my wife, she says to me, I'm going to do her French accent, though she sounds nothing like this. She says, I don't understand you. You obviously know how to clean things. You write the Monk books. So why are you such a slob? Why don't you clean anything? And the books were first person from a woman's point of view. And she read them and she'd say, I don't understand it from the books. It seems like you understand women, but in real life, you know nothing. Why can't you be more like the woman you write about?
I love it. You could do something with that as an episode.
My wife gets freaked out because she'll read about the creepy guys in my books. And it's like, I don't know, that's you too. Somewhere in your mind, you're thinking that way about people. So there's a dark side too, because every single character in a book, good or bad, comes from in here. And then she was disturbed by that storyline you're talking about in my Gated Prey, just even though she knows I didn't come up with the central idea, right. I still had to write it. And she's like, I understand you can live with that in your head for so long. What is wrong with you, you psychopath? I love you, my little sociopath.
Well, listen, we could say that to Matt about House, because I think House was really dark. And I mean, we all wish we had House, right? If ever a country needed House, it was 2 years ago. If he'd only shown up in Washington and said, I can do this, we all would have gone, yay. But he really was a dark character to write, the addiction and the, all of it. Did you find that hard to do?
I always stuck with, bottom line, he's saving people's lives. And I always thought there was a part of him that really, really, wanted to do that and liked doing that. He always played it off that he just liked to solve puzzles and that's all he cared about. And he didn't actually care about the people. And, fans of the show and writers of the show can debate, how true that is, or is there something in him that really, likes people and cares about people and wants to help them.
Yeah, but his relationship with the assistant that has the genetic disease, I thought there was no kindness there. I mean, he might have said, it's better to know than not, but I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I worked on the show for the first few years, and then after that, I kind of lost track of it. So I can't really speak to what you're talking about.
I'm trying to remember. He called her by a number, which has gone out of my head. But
right.
I don't know that. I mean, we've learned so much about genetics and genetic testing, and dreadful diseases and all. But I don't know that it's helpful for somebody to learn that they have a terminal genetic disease, or they might have a terminal genetic disease. How are you going to live your life if you've got a death threat hanging over it the whole time?
If you're already,
that was the one part I found really hard to deal with.
I think for parents now, including my son, who just had a baby recently, our younger son, it's a real question whether you get the knowledge for your kid and what you do with it and what you say. I think it's very complicated for the reasons that you say.
It really is. I think CRISPR technology is a fascinating thing, and it's going to meet a lot of opposition for people who think that, God disposes. But if you were going to have a child with spina bifida or some other thing, and CRISPR could reveal that and maybe fix it.
Well, in fact, my younger son does have cystic fibrosis. which we hope that CRISPR will in fact solve. And he's actually a postdoc at MIT working on curing cystic fibrosis through CRISPR. So yes, I'm very much a fan of CRISPR, as is our son.
Patrick, anything else?
Yeah, Lee, have you ever written anything with that ne'er-do-well brother of yours?
Ne'er-do-well. You mean my older, fatter brother? No, we've never written anything together. While we have a very similar sense of humor and worldview, we have very different writing styles. He's much more of a literary writer. I'm much more of a mainstream, superficial, sleazy hack writer than my brother is. We move in slightly different circles.
Oh,
We've never thought of, we've done events together. We've done signings, talks together, and Zoom things together, but we've never written together. But we talk all the time. I bounce stories off of him. He bounces stories off of me. He will share he's now into screenwriting, and I read his scripts and given him notes. So we talk all the time, but it just, our styles just don't mesh. I joke that I could take 10,000 words out of his last book and it would be far better.
Patrick's a big fan of Todd's work.
Yeah, I love
My brother is extraordinarily talented.
Yeah.
Very funny. And he sometimes will write something in a sentence that would take me 2 pages to write. And I marvel at the brilliance of that crafted sentence. And then I take great pleasure in learning it took him like 3 weeks to come up with that perfect sentence. But
he had a lot of clowns in his last story collection.
yes, he did. And the frightening thing is it's based on reality.
That's what he was.
He's the guy roaming around Palm Springs dressed as a clown. And I think Todd sat next to him at a restaurant, totally freaked out by him the whole time.
I guess clowns are trending out in Palm Desert and Indio, and there are a couple of them that show up randomly at restaurants.
Yeah, I mean, Todd's the youngest person in Palm Desert, I think.
Well, I can see clowns trending. I mean, everything seems to be trending during the pandemic. Adults having tantrums everywhere you look, on airplanes and restaurants and whatever
I'll tell you
else.
a story about my brother Todd, though. His last couple books have been about this Chicago hitman who accidentally kills a bunch of FBI agents and has to go into the mob version of witness protection. He goes off to Las Vegas, has plastic surgery, and his new identity is he's a rabbi.
Right.
And all he knows about being a rabbi comes from watching Fiddler on the Roof and listening to Barry Manilow. But he's actually a very effective rabbi. And Todd set this synagogue in Summerlin. He gave the guy the name, I can't remember what it was, David Small or something. Turns out there's a synagogue with the same name Todd came up with, and their rabbi has the same name as the guy Todd didn't Google. He didn't do any research. Thankfully, that rabbi has a wonderful sense of humor, and rather than suing the hell out of Todd, embraced him and had Todd come speak at the synagogue. In fact, it's had Todd for each book, and it's talked about how the Talmud and all this fits in, and they become really good friends. And I've attended a couple of those events, and it's great.
Wasn't David Small the name of the rabbi in that absolutely amazing series? I'm sure it was.
I couldn't remember Todd's character's name, but I used to read those Harry Kimmelman books when I was a kid.
Yeah, I love the Harry Kimmelman books. And
it became a terrible TV series called Lanigan's Rabbi.
Yeah, but the books were really excellent. Right. I am hearing dogs in distress, so I am going to have to exit. But why don't you guys carry on? And let me just leave the meeting. What a pleasure it's been.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
And Lee, I really, truly love the book. So thank you so much for doing that. Patrick, have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
And happy Halloween to you all. Bye.
Bye.
And there she goes.
She doesn't look a day over 23. I can tell how she fooled those dogs.
She's going to outlive all of us here at the Poison Pen. Yeah, no, she's incredible. I can't, the energy, and it's very inspirational and exhausting.
I can imagine.
Well, gentlemen, it's about 7:15, so what a great event. And let me see if there's any more questions. There are, well, if there's any doubt about the Eve books, people really like them and they want more, Lee, so.
Tell my publisher, do like Star Trek, send in a giant writing campaign and let them know how much, or better yet, pre-order Movieland, because they'll make the decision about a fifth Eve Ronin based on the sales of Gated Prey and the pre-orders for Movieland.
Did you Is there any like subliminal message about Lucas Davenport in here? That would be kind of amusing if there were.
No, but I did have some people, not John Sanford, but I have had people on Twitter like nasty yank, telling me I'm ripping off John Sanford. So I responded with about 15 different books with the word pray in them. Michael Crichton's book and Wilbur Smith and all these others. And bless his heart, John Sanford weighed in and said, "Oh, come on! I mean, you can't copyright a title." And he had a book called Stormfront. The same month or something, the 3 other authors had a book called Stormfront.
He's got a shockwave. Exactly.
And another writer just came out with a book called Pray. John Gilstrap just came out with a book with Pray in the title.
Oh, really?
I wasn't too concerned, but there were some troublemakers on Twitter who came after me for that.
I like, do you remember the Replacements called one of their albums Let It Be, just to just to mess with people? I thought that was great. Well, gentlemen, this has been a great event. And here are some of the signed copies we have left of Gated Prey. We've ordered copies of the necklace as well, and we'll have those in very shortly. So hope you guys have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much for having us. Great to see you again, Matt. It's been 48 hours.
I know, it's crazy.
Have you guys done a couple of gigs already together?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I saw Lee at his big launch party a couple of nights ago.
And I saw Matt at his launch where he had people from his Wednesday night writers group, his Tuesday night writers group, his Sunday afternoon writers group, and his Monday morning at 6 a.m. writers group.
All the writers who've helped me, there are about 50 of them.
That's cool.
Well, thank you. This is great, Patrick.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for watching on Facebook and YouTube, and we will see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Have a great night.